Hello everyone. This video is an explanation for the first 60 lines of the lesson Looking Backward from year 2000 to 1887 by Edward Bellamy. Before we start, let's talk about some points to better understand our story. And first we'll start with some economic systems. These are not the only ones found in our world, but these are the ones related to our story. First we have capitalism. It is an economic and political system in which countries' trade and industry are controlled by the private owners. And by the private owners, we mean, of course, citizens. For example, the United States. Second, communism. It is a system in which most property and economic resources are owned and controlled by the government. For example, North Korea. Third, socialism. It is a system in which the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the whole community. And by the whole community, we mean, of course, both the government and people. So the difference between communism and socialism is that in socialism, people are involved in the means of production. The government decides how the production is distributed among people. You have probably heard of utopia and dystopia. Utopia is an imaginary or a fictional place in which the whole society, including government, laws, and conditions, is perfect. Some elements of utopia would be justice, equality, and peace. Dystopia is a society opposite to utopia. Some of the elements of dystopia or a dystopian society would be injustice, inequality, and corruption. A brief background of the history of America or the United States in the 19th century. We start with the Industrial Revolution. Although it started in Britain in 1760, but later on it spread to Europe and the America. People were disappointed as they expected to have a better life. The machines replaced men in the workplace. So what happened is that the business owner, he became richer as the production increased with the new machines, but the workers, they lost their jobs, which was replaced by the machine, so they became unemployed, and the lower class, who were already unemployed, they had no chance with these new machines. And what happened here, the rich people became richer and the poor people became poorer, and the middle class disappeared. So we had classism. Second, we have the American Civil War in 1861 to 1865, and the Civil War was about slavery. People killed one another. It was a civil war within the United States, and it was divided between the North and the South. Of course, the South against slavery, while the North favoring it. And this has caused social, political, and economic instability within the country itself. And finally, we had the Long Depression, and thousands of businesses failed, of course, as a consequence of what happened before the Industrial Revolution, American Civil War. So, and when businesses failed, many people lost their jobs as well. So unemployment increased, and this also has caused instability as people struggled to have their needs and survive. As a result, the decades of 1870s and 1880s were marked by economic and social disturbances. And looking backward, the main purpose of Edward Bellamy was a social and economic evolution and not a political revolution. He was not aiming to overthrow the government or whatsoever, but he wanted social reforms. Bellamy believed that capitalism is the main causation of the economic and social crisis. Capitalism should be replaced by socialism. So, first of all, let's start with a short introduction, since this is not the beginning of the text. Julian West, a wealthy 19th century businessman, sleeps for more than 100 years. When he's awakened in year 2000 by Dr. Leet, Julian finds a new society where the government provides everything for citizens. As the excerpt opens, Julian, who narrates the story, talks with Dr. and Mrs. Leet about his reaction to the new world. So, first of all, Julian West represents the businessmen and capitalists in the 19th century. Those are the ones Bellamy was trying to convince. So the story was written in the 1800s. And Edward Bellamy was addressing those people or capitalists in the 1800s or 19th century who were against his theories for social and economic reforms. They doubted Bellamy's theories for social reforms. Here, Edward Bellamy used Julian West as a person who sleeps for more than 100 years. Why was it 100 years? Because simply Edward Bellamy believes that social reforms could not be done with just a magic stick. It is a process, and it takes time. How much time, he did not decide, but at least, let's say, as an example, he gave here 100 years. And also here we have, of course, a clue for the genre of the story, and that would be science fiction, for a simple reason that we have here time traveling. No way a person may sleep for 100 years and then he just wakes up normally and have a normal life. He's awakened in year 2000. So the setting of the story is 2000, but that is fiction, because the story was written in the 1800s. As if like now we're talking about a story that's happening in year 3000, for example. So you have to take into consideration that this story was written in the 1800s, and we're talking about the setting of the story is year 2000. So when he's awakened in year 2000 by Dr. Late, Julian finds a new society where the government provides everything for citizens. So here we're talking about either, let's say, a communism or socialism. A new society. So in this story, let's say, he's criticizing the 19th century society. And since we're talking about a new society where the government provides everything for citizens, so 19th century is a capitalist society. So the system in the 19th century was capitalism, and the new society is either communism or socialism. As the excerpt opens, Julian who narrates the story, and here we have a clue that the story is written from Julian's point of view, and this allows Edward Bellamy to show his audience, the capitalists, that he understands their viewpoint. Because, as we said before, Julian West represents those capitalists. He talks to Dr. and Mrs. Leet. And in the story, Dr. and Mrs. Leet, they represent Bellamy and his thoughts for the utopian society. Dr. and Mrs. Lee were evidently not a little startled to learn when they presently appeared that I had been all over the city alone that morning. And it was apparent that they were agreeably surprised to see that I seemed so little agitated after the experience. And here the pronoun I, it shows that it's written from the first person point of view, which is Julian's point of view. And here we have a direct characterization by the author when he said that Julian was agitated, and that would mean that people who oppose Bellamy's ideas in the 19th century, or the capitalists, they were troubled, as agitated as a synonym for troubled, with the new society he was calling for. Your stroll could scarcely have failed to be a very interesting one, said Mrs. Lee, as we sat down to table soon after. You must have seen a good many new things. And here in this part we can infer that there were many bad things in the 1800s or the 19th century that needed to be changed, since the new society, it has many good and new things. So as if like they're saying that the old ones, or the 19th century society, had many bad things. Or Edward Bellamy, in other words, he means that there are many things in the 19th century that needed to be changed. I saw very little that was not new, I replied. But I think what surprised me as much as anything was not to find any stores on Washington Street or any banks on State. And here we have another clue for the setting of the story, which would be the United States. And as if he's saying that capitalism is the basis of dystopia, as 19th century society was a dystopian society according to Bellamy, and the new society would be a perfect one. Everything is new and everything is good in the new society in the year 2000. And here we have, of course, the thing that most shocked Edward Bellamy or Julian here would be having no stores and or banks. And here also we should notice that capitalist, the first thing he asked about was a store and bank, as if like he's more worried about, let's say, money. And that reflects, let's say, the capitalist theory or the capitalist way of thinking. What have done with the merchants and bankers? Hung them all, perhaps, as the anarchists wanted to do in my day. So here, hung them. It is a kind of a criticize, like it is a violent behavior. So here Edward Bellamy is criticizing the use of violence in the 1800s resulted from or by instability and the high unemployment rate. As I said before, many people lost their jobs and they needed to do whatever it takes for them to have their needs. And people did not believe in the authority or the government because the government did not provide people with whatever they need. So that raised the anarchists who did not believe or did not follow any authority. Not so bad as that, replied Dr. Leet. And whatever Dr. or Mrs. Leet say, and that represents Edward Bellamy's ideas or theories and the way he replied to those capitalists. We have simply dispensed with them. And by them, of course, we mean the merchants and bankers. Their functions are obsolete in the modern world. So here in the modern world, there is no need for merchants or bankers. The base of the new society is to get rid of direct trade. Who sells you things when you want to buy them? I inquired. And here in this part, we see that the upper class, because as Julian, let's say, is a wealthy person, he belongs to the upper class. He's mostly concerned actually with himself because he did not ask about people or what happened to the lower class. He's still asking about, let's say, buying and the upper class. Who sells you things when you want to buy them? I inquired. And here, of course, it shows, let's say, egocentrism by the upper class, as they did not worry about the lower class. There is neither selling nor buying. The distribution of goods is affected in another way. And here, what replaced trade or buying and selling is the distribution, so no need for money. There are no rich and poor people in the new society. As to the bankers, having no money, we have no use for those gentry. By the gentry, we mean the upper class. So in the new society, in the old society, 19th century, the bankers were the upper class, which Julian West belonged to them. So the bankers were the upper class, and there were different classes. So in the new one, it's all, let's say, all people are equal. No need for the upper class. You were surprised, he said, at my saying that we got along without money or trade. But a moment's reflection will show you that trade existed and money was needed in your days simply because the business or production was left in private hands. And that, consequently, they are superfluous now. So here we have like Edward Bellamy also blaming capitalism when he says that the business of production was left in private hands. As I said before, that is capitalism. So if the production is not or were not left in the private hands, there will be no need to use of money. As a result, no different social classes. We decide the social class as rich, middle class, and poor based, of course, on how much money they have. And here, if there is no money, so we don't have, let's say, different classes. I do not at once see how that follows, I replied. It is very simple, said Dr. Leet. When innumerable different and independent persons produce the various things needful to life and comfort, endless exchanges between individuals were requisite in order that they might supply themselves with what they desired. And here the word simple, as if like Edward Bellamy is saying that his theory for social reforms and economic reforms are very practical and feasible. So it is not complicated. And the word independent, it shows that people are independent or free in the new society, so it does not control or force them. They might supply themselves with what they desire. So individualism is preserved in the new society just because the government provides them with whatever they want, and just because business, there's no trade, there's no business, it doesn't mean that individuality is removed. People are not forced by the government. These exchanges constituted trade, and money was essential as their medium. But as soon as the nation became the sole producer, and here again we're talking about socialism, and the word nation, it shows that people feel bound to a single culture or value. So the author, or Edward Bellamy here, did not use the word country or state, he used nation. And this one, it shows, let's say, a feeling of belonging of people, let's say, to the whole society or the whole community. So, but as soon as the nation became the sole producer of all sorts of commodities, there was no need of exchange between individuals, that they might get what they required. Also, this, it shows that people are free to have whatever they wanted. They are not forced by the government. So this one shows different, like, are we talking about socialism or communism? And here we have, of course, a clue that it is socialism. So Edward Bellamy is calling for socialism to replace capitalism. Everything was procurable from one source, and nothing could be procured anywhere else, which means that the means of production are not left to the private sector, because in capitalism anyone can produce whatever he wants, and the means of production are left in the private sector, which means businessmen. And here everything was procurable from one source. A system of direct distribution from the national storehouse took the place of trade, and for this money was unnecessary. So people are provided with all their needs. There's a direct distribution which replaces trade and the stores. So no need for stores, no need for shops. People do not need to engage in trade, struggle to get money, or buy their needs. Everything is provided. And instead of stores and shop, the author used the word storehouses. So people they store, let's say, the goods or whatever they produce, and they store it in these storehouses, and then there's a direct distribution. And of course, the money is not necessary in this case. And we're talking about the new society. How is the distribution managed? I asked. This question, of course, is asked by Julian West, which represents the capitalists. And as we notice that the capitalists are always asking, as if, and this shows how doubtful they are, as if like they're troubled with the new society or the new reforms Edward Bellamy is suggesting, because this would take from their power to make them equal with all classes. On the simplest possible plan, and again the word simple is used to emphasize the feasibility or the practicality of his social reform. Nothing is complicated, but they're just finding more and more reasons to ask, as if like they're looking for a trouble, let's say, in his theory or a place just to stop him, and his theory is not working, but he always has a solution. He has the answers ready for them. On the simplest possible plan, replied Dr. Leet, a credit corresponding to his share of an annual product of a nation is given to every citizen on the public books at the beginning of each year, and a credit card issued him with which he procures at the public storehouses found in every community, whatever he desires whenever he desires it. And here again we're talking about a credit instead of money. So again, no need for money in the new society. If we want to reach a utopian society, according to Bellamy, money can be replaced by credit. No need for money at all. And the word nation, of course, is repeated here instead of using state or country to emphasize the relation between the nation and the citizens, or the government, the whole community, and the citizen, which, as I said before, the feeling of belonging to the whole community. Found in every community, and this one, of course, it shows equality among different communities, because, as I said before, the history of the United States, we had the Civil War between the North and the South. The South were against slavery because that's where most slaves actually lived, while the North was mainly known for the upper class. Whatever he desires whenever he desires, and this one, of course, emphasizes the freedom. So even though it is regulated and managed by the nation, it doesn't mean that people are forced. Here they still have freedom to do whatever they want. This arrangement, you will see, totally obviates the necessity for business transactions of any sort between individuals and consumers. So again, no need for business, no need for trade between people in order to have whatever they want. Another question by Julian West here, which again represents the doubtful questions of the capitalist Edward Bellamy was trying to convince. What if you have to spend more than your card in any 1 year? I asked. And here let's say the question itself, as if like Edward Bellamy is criticizing the capitalist mentality, because they're still asking about themselves. And it spends more, it shows, let's say, more like a luxury, because, as I said before, the community or the national storehouse, it provides them with whatever they want. So the provision is so ample that we're more likely not to spend it all. So here the credit is supposed to be enough for people. Their aim is to get what they need for life and comfort, and not luxury. Replied Dr. Leet. But, and the word but here, of course, there's an exception, because people are free. But if extraordinary expenses should exhaust it, we can obtain a limited advance on the next year's credit. Though this practice is not encouraged, and a heavy discount is charged to check it. And the word limit, of course, it shows that the nation here managed like simply to make sure that in the year after the credit will be enough for that person to obtain his needs. So in case like he gets whatever he wants, or he can spend the whole credit for the year after, it shows that this person in this year, he chose, let's say, a luxurious life, and he can spend way more than others. But here, let's say, the nation storehouse and the credit system, it shows that if he needs, let's say, to spend a bit more, that is limited, to make sure, first of all, he does not spend much more than others, and second, which is the most important, that in the year after he will not be in need, because the credit card for the year after will be less than others. So that would be the best way to make sure some do not spend much more credits than others, which shows equality here. Of course, if a man showed himself a reckless spendthrift, which means a person, of course, who spends credit, let's say, or money recklessly, he would receive his allowance monthly or weekly instead of yearly, or if necessary, not be permitted to handle it all. Also here, as if again, they kept all people free, and to make sure that a person does not spend all his credit in a short time, and then he will be in need for the rest of the year. And this is the best way to help the individual and not to take away his freedom from him. The people can still buy whatever they want, but if a person, let's say, shows reckless spending, the nation interferes to give his spending monthly or weekly, just to make sure that in the month or the week after, they give him new credits and he has enough credit to buy whatever he wants. So we stop here with the first 60 lines. Next video we'll talk about the rest of the story.